The history of the VOC, Dutch East India Company. The Dutch East India Company, known as the Vereenigde Oostindische Compagnie (VOC) in Dutch, was one of the world's first multinational corporations and remains one of the most powerful trading entities ever established. Founded in 1602, the VOC played a central role in shaping global commerce, particularly in Southeast Asia, but its reach extended far beyond the borders of modern-day Indonesia. Over the course of 2 centuries, the VOC amassed enormous wealth, left a lasting impact on global trade routes, and had a profound influence on the cultures and economies of many regions. However, its history is also fraught with violence, exploitation, and controversy. Founding and early expansion. The VOC was founded in 1602, during a time of fierce competition among European nations to control the lucrative trade routes to Asia. Spices like pepper, cloves, nutmeg, and cinnamon were highly sought after in Europe, and various Portuguese and Spanish merchants dominated the trade in the East Indies, modern Indonesia, Malaysia, and India. The Dutch, eager to break this monopoly, formed the VOC, which was granted monopoly rights by the Dutch government to trade in Asia. Anecdote. The formation of the VOC came after a string of failed attempts by smaller Dutch merchant companies to break into the spice trade. One of the key figures in its establishment was Johan van Oldenbarnevelt, a Dutch statesman who recognized that the various small companies could not compete effectively with the powerful Portuguese and Spanish without cooperation. Thus, the VOC was established as a joint stock company, allowing individual merchants to invest in it and share in its profits, a novel concept at the time. Reminiscence. A merchant named Peter van den Broek, who sailed on one of the first VOC voyages, wrote about the excitement and hope that accompanied the early expeditions. In his diaries, Van den Broek described the exotic sights and smells of the East Indies, from the bustling ports of Banten to the lush spice plantations of Ambon. He marveled at the vast potential for wealth in the region, but also noted the perils of such voyages, where disease and piracy were constant threats. The VOC's Golden Age, Monopoly and Expansion, 1602 to 1700. During the 17th century, the VOC rapidly expanded its influence and became a dominant force in Asian trade. One of its earliest victories was the capture of Malacca from the Portuguese in 1641, a key port that controlled access to the Spice Islands. The VOC also established trading posts and colonies in Ceylon, Sri Lanka, India, Japan, and Taiwan. The company was not only involved in the spice trade, but also became active in trading tea, textiles, porcelain, and other luxury goods. Anecdote. The company's headquarters were in Batavia, modern Jakarta, which was founded by the VOC in 1619 under the command of Jan Pieterszoon Cohen. Cohen was one of the most prominent and controversial figures in VOC history. A ruthless governor, he believed in the aggressive expansion of VOC power and infamously led the Banda Massacre in 1621, where his forces killed thousands of the indigenous people who refused to sell their nutmeg exclusively to the VOC. Reminiscence. A Dutch merchant, Willem Janszoon, who visited Banda after the massacre, was horrified by the destruction. He wrote, "What once was a garden of spices, rich and vibrant, is now silent. The air smells of death, not nutmeg." This account, along with many others, illustrates the brutal methods the VOC employed to secure its monopolies. In Japan, the VOC was the only European entity allowed to trade with the isolationist Tokugawa shogunate. The company maintained a small trading post on the island of Dejima near Nagasaki. The VOC's position as the sole conduit between Japan and Europe gave it a lucrative edge in the trade of silver and silk, among other goods. Anecdote. A prominent VOC trader named Francois Caron, who spent several years in Japan, described his experience in detail in letters to his superiors. He noted the strict restrictions placed on the Dutch, including their confinement to Dejima, but also remarked on the cultural exchanges that took place during this period. The Dutch brought Western scientific knowledge, including astronomy and medicine, to Japan, while the Japanese offered their own innovations in return. The Cape Colony, a strategic outpost. In 1652, the VOC established a refreshment station at the Cape of Good Hope, modern-day Cape Town, South Africa, to supply its ships traveling between Europe and Asia. This outpost eventually grew into a full-fledged colony, where Dutch settlers, later known as Boers, began farming the land and interacting with the indigenous Khoikhoi people. Anecdote: Jan van Riebeek, the first commander of the Cape settlement, kept meticulous diaries of the early days of the colony. He described the challenges faced by the settlers, from poor soil to strained relations with the Khoikhoi, whom they attempted to trade with and later displaced. Van Riebeek's diary also provides fascinating insights into the social life of the early colony, with entries on feasts, marriages, and the arrival of new ships from Europe. Reminiscence: a settler named Hendrik Cloete, who arrived at the Cape in the late 1600s, wrote about the land's beauty, but also about the harsh conditions of colonial life. Cloete's family struggled with disease, drought, and conflicts with local indigenous groups, yet they also found success in wine production, which became an important industry at the Cape. Cloete's letters offer a window into the complex interactions between Dutch settlers and the local populations, both peaceful and violent. Decline and corruption, 1700 to 1800. By the 18th century, the VOC began to experience significant problems. The company's administrative costs were skyrocketing, and corruption was rampant among VOC officials. Many of the company's employees enriched themselves at the company's expense, and the VOC struggled to maintain its monopolies in the face of growing competition from the British East India Company and the French East India Company. Anecdote: one notorious case of corruption involved Isaac Le Maire, a Dutch merchant and one of the wealthiest shareholders in the VOC. Le Maire sought to manipulate the company's stock prices and was eventually expelled from the company for embezzlement. This scandal sent shockwaves through the VOC's ranks and contributed to its financial instability. Reminiscence: a VOC captain named Cornelis de Jong, who sailed in the late 1700s, wrote about the decaying empire that the VOC had become. He described how the once grand trading posts were now poorly maintained, and many of the company's employees were more interested in personal gain than in maintaining VOC dominance. De Jong lamented the loss of discipline and the greed that seemed to plague every level of the company. The VOC's final years and legacy. By the late 18th century, the VOC was in terminal decline. The company was deeply in debt, and its trading empire was crumbling due to competition, corruption, and a lack of innovation. In 1799, the Dutch government officially dissolved the VOC, and its assets were taken over by the Batavian Republic, the Dutch government at the time. The remnants of the VOC's empire, including its colonies in Indonesia and South Africa, eventually became part of the Dutch colonial empire. Reminiscence: Jacob Meerman, a former VOC merchant, wrote a poignant letter in 1798, just before the company's collapse. "We were kings of the seas," he lamented, "but now we are paupers, weighed down by our own greed." Meerman's words reflect the disillusionment felt by many former employees of the company, who had seen the VOC rise to unprecedented heights only to fall into ruin. Reflections on the VOC's legacy. The legacy of the VOC is multifaceted. On the one hand, it was a pioneering force in global trade and introduced innovations such as the joint stock company, which revolutionized the way businesses were structured. The VOC helped establish the Netherlands as a global economic powerhouse and laid the foundation for modern capitalism. However, the company's history is also marked by violence, exploitation, and inequality. The VOC's pursuit of profit often came at the expense of the indigenous peoples whose lands and resources it exploited. Its involvement in the slave trade, the brutal suppression of local resistance, as in the Banda Islands, and its use of force to maintain monopolies have left a dark stain on its legacy. Anecdote: Willem van Haren, a Dutch poet, famously wrote in the 18th century about the VOC's decline, referring to it as a fallen giant. His poem reflects the ambivalence many Dutch citizens felt about the company. It had brought wealth and prestige to the Netherlands, but had also become a symbol of corruption and greed. In the end, the VOC's rise and fall offer a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked corporate power and the lengths to which companies will go to secure profits. Its history is a reminder of the complexity of global trade and the human costs that often accompany it. The creator of Polly Speaks For You has always been driven by a passion for giving a voice to those who need it most. Whether it's through text-to-speech technology or voice recognition, the goal has always been to create tools that help individuals, especially those with disabilities or learning challenges, communicate and interact with the world in a way that is meaningful and empowering. The stories shared, such as those about the sailors aboard the HMS Victory, are not just about reliving history. They are about the power of voice. Through Polly Speaks For You, the creator saw an opportunity to use storytelling as a medium to convey courage, strength, and resilience, much like the sailors of the past. These stories are intended to inspire and engage users, reminding them of the importance of their voices, both literally and metaphorically. The idea behind these stories is to showcase how technology, particularly speech technology, can be a tool for preserving history, while also empowering users with the capability to share their own narratives. By blending history with technology, the creator of Polly Speaks For You aims to demonstrate how powerful a voice can be in shaping and sharing our world, past and present. In a sense, these stories represent more than just entertainment. They are a way for the creator to give a voice to history, to connect with users in a deeply human way, and to remind them that their voices matter, whether they are telling their own stories or those of others. The creator's work in developing Polly Speaks For You is never just about making a functional tool. It was about making sure that every voice had the power to be heard. If you've enjoyed this video, please remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons to stay updated with more great content. This video highlights the powerful features of Polly Speaks For You, South Africa's leading accessibility software. To learn more, visit www.polyspeaks4u.co.za. We invite you to support this meaningful dyslexic initiative developed by someone who truly understands the challenges of dyslexia. Want to help us grow? Hit that subscribe button and support our journey. Thank you for watching.